First contact with Mitis. I am Cetal, senior anthropologist of the collective mind, and I must document what I've witnessed. For centuries, we've studied the death customs of every sapient species, but nothing prepared me for encountering humanity's death. The battlefield of New Perseus still smoldered when I began my meditation. As a member of the collective mind, I can perceive the metaphysical manifestations of death that each species creates. I expected to find what I always found: the savage, hungry specters that most species conjure to represent their end. Instead, I found him sitting cross-legged among the wreckage, humming an earth melody called Moon River. He appeared as a tall human male with silver-white hair, wearing what humans call a well-tailored suit in midnight blue. His skin wasn't corpse-pale like our death guides, nor was he shrouded in darkness like the Zentari Deathbringers. He simply looked peaceful. "Hello, researcher," he said, turning to me with eyes that held galaxies. "I'm Mitis. Would you care to join me? The sunset here is quite lovely, even with all this unfortunate mess." I hesitated. In my 1,000 years of study, no death incarnation had ever invited casual conversation. They were forces of ending, of termination, of finality. Yet here was humanity's death. Appreciating a sunset. Yes, I managed, settling my crystalline form beside him. "You're not what I expected." He laughed, and it sounded like wind chimes. I get that a lot, especially from other deaths. They think I'm doing it wrong because I don't stride around in a black hood carrying a scythe. He paused, considering. "Though I did try that look once, in the 14th century. Bit dramatic for my taste." "But you are death," I said. "You end human lives." "I prefer to think of it as helping them transition," he corrected gently. "Everyone and everything must change states eventually. The universe herself will do so one day. I just try to make the process a bit more graceful." A dying soldier caught my attention. A young human woman, badly wounded. I expected Mitis to sweep in dramatically, to tear her soul away as other death incarnations did. Instead, he stood slowly, straightened his tie, and walked over to her with the bearing of a concerned friend. "Hello, Sarah," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "I know you're scared, but I'm here with you." Did we win?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes," Mitis smiled. "Your actions saved the colony. They'll name their children after you for generations to come." She managed a small smile. "Will it hurt?" "No, dear one. It's like falling asleep after a long day of good work. And when you wake..." He held out his hand, and the most extraordinary thing happened. Music began to play. Not physical sound, but the mathematical poetry of the universe itself. "One last dance?" he asked. Her soul rose from her body, young and strong again, and took his hand. They began to waltz among the stars themselves, her laughter echoing across dimensions as they spun through cosmic dust and newborn suns. I watched, transfixed, as he guided her through what humans call the veil, their dance never faltering. When they reached the threshold, he bowed deeply, she curtsied, and she stepped through with a smile. "You danced them across?" I asked when he returned, astonished by the beauty of it. "Everyone needs a hand to hold in times of transition," he said simply. "Humans especially understand this. They're remarkable that way. They know life and death are really just different movements in the same endless dance." That's when I began to understand why humanity's relationship with death was so different from other species. Their death wasn't an ending, but a companion. Not a terror, but a friend who'd help you find your footing when the music changed. "Would you like to learn more?" Mitis asked, noting my fascination. "There's quite a lot to cover, and I do enjoy having an audience that isn't technically deceased." I nodded, knowing I was about to discover something profound about both humanity and the nature of existence itself. After all, any species whose death incarnation appreciates sunset and knows how to waltz must have insights worth sharing. "Excellent," he said, producing a thermos from nowhere. tea. It's Earl Grey. Death may be eternal, but there's no reason we can't be civilized about it. And so began my education in humanity's unique approach to the final dance we all must learn. The dance of life. The concept of a cosmic dance was something I struggled to comprehend at first. As Mitis and I walked through what he called the in-between, that shimming space where life and death overlap, he explained it with characteristic patience. Every soul has its own rhythm, he said, pausing to help an elderly human spirit find its footing. Listen closely. I extended my crystalline senses and was overwhelmed by the symphony. Each departing soul resonated with a unique frequency, some quick and staccato, others flowing like classical human compositions. Mitis moved among them with the grace of a conductor, adjusting his steps to match each individual's tempo. The Vraxian Deathbringer simply severs the connection, I observed, remembering the brutal efficiency of other species' methods. The hive mind collective absorbs their dead directly. Mitis nodded, straightening his ever-present body. Different approaches for different species, but humans have always understood that endings are also beginnings. Watch this next transition. It's rather special. A small human child's spirit stood before us, clutching a worn stuffed animal. Unlike the fear I'd witnessed in other species young, she looked at Mitis with curiosity. "Are you the dancing man?" she asked. "Grammy told me about you before she left." Mitis knelt down to her level, his smile gentle. "Indeed I am. Your grandmother and I had a lovely waltz. But for you, my dear," he stood and made an elaborate bow, "I think something more adventurous is in order. Do you know how to fly?" The child's eyes widened. "Like Peter Pan. Even better." Mitis held out both hands. "Shall we?" What followed defied my understanding of death transitions. They soared through the in-between, spinning through cosmic debris and starlight, the child's laughter echoing through dimensions. Mitis matched her joy, teaching her to loop and twirl through space itself, making the journey an adventure rather than an ending. "You see," he explained later after ensuring she safely crossed through the veil, "humans give their children stories about death. Not just fearsome warnings or cold facts. Actual stories. They tell them about bright lights, beautiful gardens, reunions with loved ones. They make death part of their understanding of life from the very beginning." "But surely that makes them soft," I protested, thinking of the brutal efficiency of my own species' death guide. Other species teach their young to fear death, to fight against it with everything they have. Mitis laughed, the sound making nearby stars pulse brighter. "And how has that worked out?" "Humans accept death as natural, while simultaneously being the most determined species to survive I've ever encountered. They fight diseases, explore dangerous worlds, push the boundaries of science, not because they fear death, but because they love life so much." He paused to adjust the cuffs of his suit, a habit I'd noticed he had when making an important point. "They dance with me not because they've given up, but because they understand that everything in the universe is movement, is change. The trick is learning to move with grace." A surge of energy caught our attention. A massive space battle was occurring several systems away. Other death incarnations would be there, harvesting souls with mechanical precision. But Mitis simply straightened his tie and held out his arm to me. "Care to observe? It's about to get rather interesting." The hive mind's death collector never knows quite what to do when humans are involved in conflicts. They expect terror and get triumph, expect surrender and get songs. As we traversed the space between spaces, I began to understand why human death was so different. Other species' death incarnations were endings personified. Mitis was transition embodied, not an executioner but a teacher, not a terminator but a guide. We arrived at the battle scene to find chaos in both the physical and metaphysical planes. Ships exploded in silent bursts of fire, while souls prepared to depart their mortal forms. The hive mind's death collector, a writhing mass of shadow and efficiency, was already present. "Ah," Mitis said, "right on time." He straightened his body one final time and stepped forward. Now, my dear Xetal, you're about to see something truly remarkable. How humans face death even in the midst of war. They don't just die. They orchestrate their own final movements in the great dance. And as the battle raged on, I watched humanity's death transform what should have been a horror into something approaching art. Each soul, even those taken suddenly in combat, was given a moment of grace, a chance for one last perfect movement before the final vow. The hive mind's death collector writhed in confusion, its efficient processes disrupted by humans who insisted on dying on their own terms, with dignity and often with surprising joy. You see, Mitis said softly, humans understand something that most species never grasp. The dance doesn't end when the music changes. You just have to learn the new steps. The Council of Deaths. The council chamber defied conventional physics, existing in a space between spaces. Here, where the boundaries between life and death grew thin, the various death incarnations of the galaxy gathered for the first time in a millennium. I was permitted to observe only because Mitis insisted, calling it a teaching moment. The chamber itself reflected each death's nature. The Vraxian Deathbringers section crawled with shadows that devoured light. The hive mind's collector pulsed with cold efficiency. The Zentari Soul Hunters area leaked perpetual screams. But where Mitis stood, stars twinkled gently, and if you listened carefully, you could hear distant waltz music. This is unprecedented. The Vraxian Deathbringer's voice grated like grinding bones. The human death interferes with the natural order. He corrupts the end process with entertainment. Mitis, standing perfectly at ease in his immaculate suit, merely smiled. I prefer to call it dignity. Though I must say, your dramatic shadows are rather entertaining in their own way. Have you considered taking up theater? Silence. The Zentari Soul Hunter rose, its form a writhing mass of ancient terrors. You make mockery of our sacred duty. Death must be feared. It must be absolute. You dance with them. Of course I dance with them, Mitis replied, straightening his body. Have you ever tried not dancing when a good song comes on? Terribly difficult. Besides, humans came up with the mambo. Seems rude not to use it. I watched in fascination as the other death incarnations recoiled at his casual attitude. The hive mind collector spoke next, its voice a monotone hum. Statistical analysis shows your methods are inefficient. Average transition time increased by 47.3% when dancing is involved. Ah, but have you measured the quality of the transition? Mitis produced a teacup from nowhere. Earl Grey, his favorite. My humans arrive on the other side happy, fulfilled, often having learned something new. Can't put a percentage on that, I'm afraid. This is the problem. The Vraxian Deathbringer slammed its shadow appendages down. Death is not meant to be happy. It is not meant to be a learning experience. It is meant to be the ultimate end, the final terror that gives meaning to existence. Mitis took a sip of tea, then set the cup aside. For the first time, I saw his ever-present smile fade slightly. Is it, though? Who exactly handed out that job description? Because I must have missed that meeting. The chamber grew deathly quiet. If you'll pardon the expression. Look at your species, Mitis continued, his voice gentle but carrying an undertone I'd never heard before. The Vraxians live in constant fear, building weapons instead of gardens. The Zentari waste their final moments, screaming instead of saying goodbye. The hive mind processes death like paperwork. He stood, and suddenly the stars around him weren't twinkling. They were blazing. But humans look death in the face and ask for one last dance. They write songs about me, tell their children stories about me. They face their end with grace and courage, not because they don't fear it, but because they've learned to embrace it as part of life itself. It is not natural. The soul hunter shrieked. Natural. Mitis laughed, and the sound made galaxies ripple. My dear friend, what could be more natural than finding joy even in endings? Have you ever watched a sunset? It's the day's death, And it's beautiful. Have you seen autumn leaves fall? Death as art. The universe herself treats endings with more grace than you lot. He began to walk around the chamber, and with each step, his footprints left blooming stars. Humans understand something that you've all forgotten. Death isn't just about endings. It's about transition, about change, about the eternal dance of existence. They don't fight me or flee from me. They invite me to their celebrations, their ceremonies, their stories. They weaken themselves with this attitude. The hive mind collector droned. Do they? Mitis raised an eyebrow. Then explain to me why humans have survived everything their death world has thrown at them. Explain why they explore the most dangerous regions of space, take on impossible odds, and then write symphonies about it. They don't fear death, yet they have the strongest will to live I've ever encountered. It's quite the paradox. He reached the center of the chamber and spread his arms. Suddenly, music began to play. Not just any music, but the very symphony of the cosmos itself. You all think death must be terrible to make life meaningful. But humans have learned that life is meaningful precisely because it changes, because it moves, because it dances from one state to another. The other death incarnations watched in mixture of horror and fascination as Mitis began to dance, not just a simple waltz, but a dance that encompassed all of existence. With each step, we saw human history, soldiers dying to protect others, scientists giving their lives for discovery, ordinary people facing their ends with extraordinary courage. This is what you're missing, Mitis said as he danced. The beauty of the transition, the dignity of the change, the joy that can exist even in endings. He stopped suddenly, and the music faded. I won't change my methods. Humans have taught me too much about the art of living and dying well. The council chamber erupted in argument, but I noticed something fascinating. In the corners of the room, where the other death's shadows and screams had been, tiny stars were beginning to twinkle. And if I listened very carefully, I could hear the faint beginning of a waltz. Mitis caught my eye and winked. Change, he whispered to me, like death itself, comes to all things eventually, even to death. Humanity's gift. The aftermath of the council meeting rippled through the cosmic fabric of existence itself. I watched as Mitis' influence began to spread, subtle at first, like starlight penetrating cosmic dust. The change started with the younger species' death incarnations, those less set in their ways. The Listherians were the first to change. Their death incarnation, once a howling void of despair, began appearing to their dying as a gentle guardian instead. I witnessed its first attempt at what Mitis called easing the transition. No, Mitis coached, adjusting the Listherian death's form which wavered between terrifying and tranquil. Think less eternal darkness and more cozy evening. Humans have this lovely invention called hot chocolate. Perhaps try offering that. The Listherian death, confused but willing, manifested a steaming cup for its next transitioning soul. The dying Listherian, instead of dissolving into traditional panic, actually smiled. You see, Mitis beamed, straightening his ever-present body. Death doesn't have to be a stranger who breaks down your door. It can be a friend who helps you pack for a journey. I followed Mitis through what he called his rounds, observing as he taught other death incarnations his methods. A hive mind collector learned to pause its efficiency protocols long enough to honor individual stories. The Zentari soul hunter discovered that terror wasn't the only way to command respect. The humans have a saying, Mitis explained, as we watched a Vraxian Deathbringer awkwardly attempt its first comforting transition. They say death is a part of life. Most species see this as a fearful warning. Humans, they turned it into an invitation to live more fully. We paused to watch a human colony world where a massive solar storm threatened everything. Other species would have evacuated, abandoning their work. The humans, they threw a party. Last night on Socorro Colony, read their hastily made banner. Music played as they worked to save what they could, dancing between emergency procedures, laughing in the face of possibility. Remarkable, aren't they? Mitis mused, watching the humans celebrate even as they prepared for potential doom. They know I might be coming, and their response is to make sure they live fully until I do. A young human scientist caught my attention. She was running final calculations on a shield modification, humming along to the music, fully aware each equation might be her last. "Ah, Dr. Sarah Chen," Mitis noted warmly. "She's not scheduled for a dance with me today, though. Watch." The scientist's calculations proved correct. The shield modification worked, saving the colony. As cheers erupted, I noticed something extraordinary. The Vraxian Deathbringer, who had been hovering nearby expecting casualties, was swaying slightly to the humans' music. "It's catching on," Mitis said with satisfaction. "Like a particularly good tune." The changes spread further. The Zentari began incorporating stories of peaceful transitions into their children's education. The hive mind developed protocols for honoring individual memories before absorption. The Vraxians started building gardens alongside their weapons. But how? I asked Mitis as we watched these transformations. How do humans develop such a different relationship with death? "They had no choice," he replied, fondly watching a group of human children play near a cemetery, unafraid of the proximity to death. Their world tried to kill them countless times. They could either learn to fear me absolutely or find a way to accept me as part of existence. They chose acceptance, but being humans, they didn't stop there. They chose to make it beautiful. We visited a human hospital next, where I saw perhaps the most profound evidence of humanity's gift to the galaxy. A Vraxian lay dying, far from home. In the past, this would have meant facing their species' terrifying Deathbringer alone. Instead, they were surrounded by human medical staff who had learned their death customs, but gently improved upon them. A human nurse held the Vraxian's hand, singing softly. Their Deathbringer arrived, but instead of the usual violent severing, it attempted something new. A gentle transition, inspired by Mitis methods. They're teaching others how to die, I realized. And in doing so, teaching them how to live. Mitis nodded, producing 2 teacups from nowhere. Exactly. Humans understand that death isn't the opposite of life. It's simply life's last great adventure. And what's an adventure without a little music, a little laughter, a little dance? We watched as more species began adopting human customs around death, not replacing their own traditions entirely, but enriching them with humanity's hard-won wisdom. Memorial services included celebrations of life. Species that once rushed through death began taking time to honor it properly. "Think of it this way," Mitis said, leading me through the in-between where souls prepared for their final transition. "Every species faces the same darkness, but humans learn to fill it with stars. They taught the galaxy that endings don't have to be empty. They can be beautiful, meaningful, even joyful." A group of transitioning souls passed by. Human, Vraxian, Listherian, even a Zentari, all moving to the same cosmic rhythm, all facing their next great adventure with something approaching peace. "That," Mitis said softly, "is humanity's gift to the universe. They didn't just accept death, they taught death itself how to dance." The last waltz. I didn't realize I was dying at first. We crystalline beings of the collective mind fade gradually, our consciousness dispersing like stardust across the cosmic winds. But as I sat with Mitis watching a nebula birth new stars, I noticed my edges beginning to sparkle and drift. "Ah," Mitis said softly, setting down his ever-present teacup. "I was wondering when you'd notice. How long have you known?" I asked, watching fragments of my crystalline form catch the starlight. "Since the council meeting. Your time was coming, my dear friend, which is why I wanted you to understand." He stood, straightening his midnight blue suit. "You've been an excellent student of humanity's relationship with death. Now it's time for your final lesson." I felt what humans might call fear, but also a surprising spark of curiosity. Will it be like the others? The dancing, Better, Mitis smiled, holding out his hand. You get to choose your own music. Suddenly, I heard it, not with whatever remained of my physical form, but with the very essence of my being. The cosmic symphony I'd observed so many times was now playing for me. But it wasn't just one song. It was every moment I'd witnessed, every transition I'd studied, every laugh and tear and triumph I'd recorded in my research. You see, Mitis explained, as he guided my fading form through the steps of a dance I somehow already knew. Humans understand that we are all made of stardust. Every end is just stardust returning to the cosmos to be reborn. They learn to celebrate that cycle, to find joy in being part of the universe's eternal dance. As we moved through space and time, I saw my life's work differently. Every death I'd studied, every transition I'd recorded, had been preparing me for this moment. We spun past dying stars and newborn planets, each step leaving a trail of crystalline stardust that formed new constellations. The other death incarnations are changing. I observed as we danced past a Vraxian ceremony, where their Deathbringer was actually humming. They're learning. Of course they are. Mitis laughed, the sound making nearby stars pulse brighter. Humans have that effect on the universe. They take the most terrifying aspects of existence and find ways to make them beautiful. They taught me that death doesn't have to be an ending. It can be a transformation. We waltzed through the memories of every human transition I'd witnessed. The soldier who died laughing, the child who flew through starlight, the scientist who faced the void with wonder instead of fear. Each memory added its own note to our dancing song. I think I understand now, I said as more of my form dispersed into shimmering dust. Humans didn't just accept death, they'd reimagined it. They showed the galaxy that even the darkest moments can hold light. Precisely, Mitis beamed. And now, my dear friend, what would you like your final movement to be in this grand dance? I thought of all I'd learned, of how humans faced their greatest fear by embracing it, by making it beautiful. I want to become a constellation, I decided, one that tells this story. Mitis's smile grew wider. An excellent choice. Humans do love their stories in the stars. Our dance quickened, my crystalline form dissolving faster now. But each particle caught the light perfectly, creating patterns in the cosmic dark. As we spun, the starlight caught my dispersing essence in just the right way, forming the shape of two figures dancing among the stars. Your story will shine forever, Mitis said softly as the last of my consciousness prepared for transition. Newcomers to space will look up, see your constellation, and ask why there are dancers in the stars. And what will they be told? I asked, my voice now barely a whisper of stardust. They'll be told of the researcher who learned humanity's greatest lesson, that death is not an end to fear, but a dance to embrace, that every ending is also a beginning, that we are all, in the end, just stardust dancing our way home. As the last of my form scattered across the cosmos, I heard Mitis humming Moon River, the same song he'd been humming when I first met him. But now I understood why he chose it. Wide river, wider dreams, crossing time and space in style. My consciousness spread across the stars, each particle becoming part of the eternal dance humans had shown the galaxy. And in that final moment, I wasn't afraid. How could I be? I had learned from humanity's death himself that every end is just a new song beginning. Two dancers remain forever among the stars, a testament to humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. The understanding that even death itself can be beautiful if you just know the right steps to take. And somewhere in the cosmic dance, Mitis straightens his body, sips his tea, and prepares for the next partner in the universe's eternal waltz.